My niece didn't just rifle through my library. She convinced a probate court that my life's collection of rare books belonged to her dead mother, and I was merely their caretaker. A lifetime of collecting is built on two things: passion and provenance. I knew the history of every book on my shelves, where it was printed, who owned it, the journey it took to reach me. I just never imagined the most dramatic story would be the one my own niece would forge to steal them. The betrayal unfolded in the hollowed-out silence after my sister-in-law Lena's funeral. I was vulnerable, my savings depleted from helping with her medical bills, my spirit frayed. Chloe, my own goddaughter, arrived with her husband Mark, their concern as carefully arranged as a storefront display. Be reasonable, Chloe said, her voice dripping with a sympathy I now know was poison. Mom always loved these books. Everyone knew that. You were just keeping them warm for her. Mark nodded, his eyes already appraising and dismissing my life's work in the same glance. The judge saw the logic. A librarian's salary? You could never have assembled this. It was clearly a family asset. My brother gave me that Gatsby for my graduation, I said, my voice trembling with a fury I dared not show. He inscribed it. Chloe's smile was thin and cold. Sentiment doesn't stand up in court, Aunt B. Only documentation does. And she had documentation, a sleek, professionally forged addendum to Lena's will, stating the collection was Lena's property, left to her daughter. The judge, faced with my grief and their slick certainty, ruled in their favor. I watched them walk out with my copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. I felt like my own spine had been broken. Mr. Henderson found me weeping quietly in the history aisle of his shop. He listened, his expression growing grimmer by the second. "Show me the court papers," he said quietly. An hour later, he looked up from the documents, his eyes blazing. "The Gatsby," he said. "Your Mark. The one you showed me years ago. Is it still there?" I nodded, numb. "Good," he said, a slow, determined smile spreading across his face. "Then this isn't over. This is where we begin." The discovery was our first victory. Mr. Henderson, a bibliophile to his core, became my general. He discovered my secret cataloging mark, a tiny, coded BY, nestled in the floron on page 58 of The Great Gatsby. More importantly, he found the original bill of sale from 1982, made out to Beatrice Yang, which I had tucked for safekeeping inside my worn copy of Jane Eyre, a book Chloe had deemed not valuable enough to steal. Her entire claim was a house of cards. Our counterattack was a masterclass in quiet devastation. I played my part, the defeated, confused old woman, while Mr. Henderson filed a motion for fraud upon the court, presenting the bill of sale and an affidavit from a renowned document authenticator about my unique cataloging mark. Simultaneously, he activated his network, a silent, powerful guild of book dealers and collectors. Within days, every major auction house and rare book dealer in the country knew the collection was stolen, its provenance toxic. The market for Chloe's ill-gotten gains evaporated overnight. Cornered and facing financial ruin, Chloe retaliated with a weapon designed to shatter my world. She came to my home, not with lawyers, but with a handful of old letters. "You were always so close with your college roommate, Sarah," she hissed, her face a mask of venomous triumph. These letters, they read like love letters. What would the University Alumni Association think? What would this town say about the unfit influence you were on me as a child? Drop the lawsuit, or I'll make sure everyone knows your little secret. I was horrified, the air sucked from my lungs. The letters were innocent, the effusive outpourings of a deep, platonic friendship. But in our small, conservative town, her twisted interpretation would be a social death sentence. But a librarian's resolve for truth is a formidable thing. The horror gave way to a cold, clear focus. Mr. Henderson and I began our research. And we found the smoking gun, a birthday card from Chloe's own mother, Lena, explicitly thanking me for my lifelong, beautiful friendship with Sarah and mentioning how much she loved seeing the two of us together. Chloe's attempt to blackmail me with a perversion of my friendship was not just cruel, it was a lie that betrayed her own mother's memory. I turned the tables. I didn't hide. I wrote a poignant essay for the local paper, The Weaponization of a Friendship, celebrating the decades-long bond between me and Sarah and lamenting the avarice that would twist such a love into a weapon. The public sympathy swung violently in my favor. Chloe wasn't just a thief, she was a monster. The conclusion was a satisfyingly dry, legal affair. The court voided the fraudulent will addendum and awarded me full ownership of my collection, plus substantial damages. Chloe and Mark faced investigations for perjury and fraud. I donated a portion of the collection to the university library in a well-publicized ceremony, finally securing my legacy in the institution I loved. They thought my quiet life was an empty one, and my treasures were just things. But a life spent with books teaches you that the most powerful stories are about truth. To anyone whose story is being rewritten by others, remember, you are the author of your own life. Never let anyone steal your pen. And sometimes, the most satisfying final chapter is the one you write yourself. The victory party was held in Mr. Henderson's bookshop, surrounded by the scent of old paper and the quiet hum of justice served. My books were home, nestled back on their shelves, their spines straight as if they'd never been disturbed. But a book, once removed from its shelf, never quite fits the same way again. The same was true for me. The legal victory was public, but the emotional cleanup was a private, painstaking process. Chloe and Mark, facing a mountain of legal fees and the social equivalent of a quarantine, did the only thing they had left: they sold their story. A glossy magazine ran an interview painting them as misguided youths pressured by debt, manipulated by the cold, unforgiving nature of the rare book world. They claimed I had lured them with the collection, a temptation too great to resist. It was a masterclass in revisionist history. And it stung. Mr. Henderson, ever the pragmatist, simply clipped the article and taped it to his cash register. "Let them talk, Beatrice," he said, his voice calm. "The market has already rendered its verdict. No one will ever do business with them again. Their names are mud." But it wasn't about business anymore. It was about the quiet erosion of my peace. I found myself double-checking my locks, hesitating before answering the door. The trust one had placed in family, the foundational volume of my life, had been checked out and never returned. It was during this fragile time that a new chapter began, one I hadn't anticipated. A young woman named Anya, a graduate student in library science, contacted me. She had read about the case and my subsequent donation to the university. "Ms. Yang," she said, her voice bright with earnest admiration, "your story isn't just about books. It's about provenance in the digital age. It's about how we prove ownership of our own stories now. Would you be willing to speak to my class?" I was hesitant. My life had always been one of quiet curation, not public speaking. But Mr. Henderson nudged me. "The best way to protect a story is to tell it yourself, B. Before someone else writes a bad sequel." So I went. Standing before a room of bright-eyed students, I didn't just talk about cataloging marks and bills of sale. I spoke about the emotional provenance of a life. I showed them the birthday card from Lena, the one that had saved me from Chloe's blackmail. I talked about the weight of a signature, the power of a saved receipt, the quiet testimony of a friend's handwriting. I called it Archiving a Life, Protecting Your Narrative. The response was electric. The university asked me to lead a workshop series. A local historical society commissioned me to help families properly document and protect their own heirlooms. I, Beatrice Yang, the lonely spinster, had accidentally founded a second career as an advocate for personal legacy. Chloe's attempt to erase my story had, in fact, given it a wider audience and a deeper purpose. The Yang method of documentation, a combination of physical proof and recorded personal narrative, began to be cited in articles about elder fraud and estate planning. One afternoon, as I was sorting through a box of letters for a client, Mr. Henderson placed a small, wrapped package on my desk. Inside was a beautiful, leather-bound blank book and a fountain pen. "For your next volume," he said softly, "I've noticed you've been writing down your own stories. The ones not found in any of these other books." I looked at the empty pages, then at the shelves around me, filled with the stories of others. He was right. It was time to write my own, not as a defense against theft, but as a gift to myself. The story of a woman who loved books, who lost them, and who found her own voice in the process. The betrayal had left a scar, a permanent entry in the catalog of my life. But I had cross-referenced it under strength, resilience, and new beginnings. The collection was safe. But I had discovered that I, Beatrice Yang, was the rarest and most valuable edition of all. And my story was far from over. The final page of this chapter turned on a crisp autumn morning, a year to the day since the gavel had fallen. The last of the legal proceedings were officially closed. Chloe and Mark had accepted a plea deal, their names now permanently etched in court records alongside terms like forgery and elder abuse. They were ghosts in my world, their power to harm me legally or financially completely extinguished. Mr. Henderson and I stood in my restored library, sunlight streaming through the window and catching the dust motes dancing above my returned treasures. It was a perfect, peaceful scene. Yet, the silence felt different now, not broken, but deepened. The hollow ache of betrayal had been filled with a new, steady purpose. "It's over, Mr. Henderson said, his voice a gentle rumble in the quiet room. "No," I replied, running a finger along the spine of my returned Gatsby. "It's not over. It's catalogued." I had not merely gotten my books back. I had reclaimed my narrative. The workshop at the university had blossomed into a formal, funded initiative, the Yang Protectorate, a community resource offering free seminars on documenting personal legacies and safeguarding against familial fraud. I taught people how to create their own provenance files, a simple, powerful concept that gave them authority over their own stories. The article about Chloe and Mark was now just a yellowing clipping in my own file, a reference point of a battle fought and won. Their attempts to rewrite my story had only resulted in a more widely published, and ultimately, more truthful, final edition. On the anniversary of the verdict, I hosted a small gathering in the library. Not a victory party, but an acknowledgement. Anya, my graduate student protege, was there, along with a few trusted friends from the Historical Society. Mr. Henderson, of course, stood by the fireplace, a contented smile on his face. I didn't give a speech. Instead, I opened the beautiful blank book he had given me. I had been filling it, not with a bitter chronicle of the theft, but with the stories behind the books. The story of my brother handing me the Gatsby, his face beaming with pride. The story of finding the Jane Eyre at a dusty stall in London with Lena, both of us breathless with the thrill of the hunt. I read one aloud. A short, simple memory of my mother reading To Kill a Mockingbird to me, her voice giving life to every character. When I finished, the room was quiet, filled with the profound respect for a story well told and a life well remembered. They had tried to reduce my life to an inventory, my relationships to transactions. But here, surrounded by my books and my friends, my story was richer than ever. The final revenge wasn't in winning back my property, it was in discovering that my true, unassailable value was never on those shelves at all. It was in the quiet act of taking pen to paper, in the warmth of the friends beside me, and in the unwavering knowledge that I was, and would always be, the author of my own life. The book was closed on their betrayal. My story, however, was just beginning a fascinating new volume.